I decided to wear a bright jumper for this video. Given the topic of it, I thought I would cheer it up with my clothing. I don't even know if that makes sense. Hey Spuds, how's it going? It's Jamie, welcome back to another video, your first video. I don't know, but welcome either way. I'm very glad to have you here, and I hope you're gonna enjoy this video. I always feel really weird saying I hope you're gonna enjoy this video when I am reacting to transphobic stuff. I hope you're gonna enjoy what I have to say. So today I am reacting to a video that is probably the most requested messaged video I've ever received, except maybe Patricia Paytas's first video. It's a wonderful little advert from Alliance Defending Freedom. Very ironic name, made me giggle. And the video is called How Modern Equality Comes at Women's Expense. Spoiler alert, they're just really transphobic. But let's just crack on and watch this video. Ready? Should we just do this? Sorry for pausing it so quickly, that was just a dramatic start. I feel like I'm about to watch a movie.
Should a school-aged girl or a grown woman be forced to give up her privacy in a locker room because a biological man identifying as a woman wants to change there?
Trans women. You are talking about women who are trans? Please be respectful.
Should a shelter serving women who have survived sex trafficking and domestic violence be forced to allow biological men to sleep side by side with these women?
Again, trans women. Also, please let's realize that trans women need access to these spaces as well. As women, they are women and they need access to women's spaces like toilets, changing rooms, refuges. It's hugely important.
Should faith-based adoption providers be shut down for following their conviction that the best environment for each child includes a mother and a father in a committed and stable marriage?
Oh, nice sprinkle of homophobia in there too. Not surprised, just disappointed.
Should a biological male who believes he is female be allowed to compete against women and girls in female sports, depriving female athletes of a level playing field and countless opportunities to win and even earn college scholarships?
The description and the villainizing and the imagery of trans women in this, in the first minute, we're not even a minute in here, right? It's just so wrong and rude. And actually, despite all of the anti-trans bills that are particularly aimed towards trans girls and women competing in women's sports, there's not actually any evidence that they have any impact on the prospect of cis women, or that there's anything unfair about them competing. I've personally found no evidence of a trans woman stealing a scholarship off of a cis woman. They have no sources. They're just saying stuff and people believe it.
According to the so-called Equality Act, a priority for Democrats, including President Biden, the answer to all these questions is yes.
Funny that the answer to can women go into these women's spaces and compete in women's sports is yes. Because, you know, trans women belong in women's spaces because, funnily enough, they're women. Also, when it comes to sports, there's just something I want to point out before we go any further. Can we acknowledge that trans people have been able to compete in the Olympics since 2004? That's 17 years, multiple Olympics. And guess what? There's been no overtaking of women's sports by trans women.
Despite its appealing name, the Equality Act poses an unprecedented threat to women, children, free speech, and religious freedom.
Wow, that's a lot of fake threat and damage to be making up there. Research shows time and time again that trans women are no threat to cis women. It's just made up bullshit. Children are not harmed in any way by having LGBT plus parents, or by LGBT plus people in general. And lots of religious groups and people embrace the LGBT plus community.
At its core, the Act ignores what science tells us about the differences between men and women.
Oh, can transphobes please stop trying to use science to justify their transphobia? Just say you're a transphobe, there is no backing to you being a transphobe, there's no justification for it, and definitely no justification from science, so just stop it. The Equality Act brings what we know about gender identity and sexual orientation into the 21st century and protects it. I personally have a PhD and have done many years of research into the trans community, and I've found developmental and biological similarities between trans men and cis men. That's what science is telling us. Trans people are the gender they say they are. And it's not just me, clearly. There is a whole bunch of science out there that supports trans people. Scientific findings aside, using genitals and chromosomes and making them the be-all and end-all of a person's gender and sex is very reductionist and old-fashioned. What about the majority of people who don't know their chromosomes? What about people who have chromosomes that you would not typically expect them to have? What about people with ambiguous genitals? What about people who have had accidents or surgery that has changed in some way their genitals or their reproductive organs? It's just not as black and white as people used to think it is.
Leaving women and girls to pay the price in shelters, locker rooms, and on the field of play. The same goes for a similar bill dubbed Fairness for All, which proposes meager and likely temporary carve-outs for religious groups. In short, the Equality Act doesn't offer equality. It creates victims.
Oh, I really think this might be the worst anti-trans ad I've seen, because they're not even trying to be nice about it or cover up their transphobia in any way. This is literally just like, hey, we're transphobic. It's so disgusting. And it's like, we're creating victims by giving trans women basically equal rights and access to women's spaces where they belong. Trans women in women's spaces do not put cis women in danger, but kicking trans women out of women's spaces puts the trans women in danger. That's what we should be focusing on.
How would the Equality Act do this? By adding gender identity and sexual orientation to federal laws like the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the act seeks to impose the government's views about marriage, sex, and what it means to be male and female on the entire nation.
LGBT plus people are getting more rights. Transphobes and homophobes think that this in some way impedes on their rights. Just the thinking that the Equality Act and the fight for equal rights for everybody is a step back in equality, that's very confusing.
For starters, the Equality Act would mandate that men who identify as women be allowed to compete for spots on female sports teams, for women's scholarships, and for other academic and sports-related opportunities designed specifically for women.
But trans women are women, so... Also, the way they're talking about sports and who should be included in which sports teams makes it sound like they really literally just say your assigned birth sex determines which category of sports you compete in, men's or women's. And going on that would mean I could go and compete in women's sports. Me, the trans man, who has higher testosterone than the trans women they're talking about, seeing as trans women have to be on testosterone suppressants for a year.
Female athletes like Selena Sol, Chelsea Mitchell, and Alana Smith know this firsthand. They've all become victims of local policies similar to the Equality Act that force them to compete against biological males in competitive track meets.
I really hate how they're making the trans women characters in this cartoon specifically look much bigger, taller, more muscular than the cis women characters. I looked into this particular case and the people involved, and the two trans women are like the same build as the cis women they were competing against. And they do realise that there can be cis women who are taller and broader and stronger and more muscular than average as well, right?
The results are predictable. Over a 3-year period, high school girls in Connecticut missed out on 15 titles and 85 opportunities to advance to the next level of competition. With the Equality Act, female athletes across the country will pay the price for ignoring the meaningful biological differences between men and women.
Where are these numbers coming from? I would really love to know. And like I mentioned, I read about this particular situation that they're talking about, and the trans women won some races, and the cis women won some races. They didn't always win or lose against each other in the same pattern. And if they're sometimes winning against the trans women, how could they possibly know that they lost a certain race and lost a certain medal because of the trans women specifically? And like I mentioned earlier, there's actually no evidence that trans women have been unfairly taking medals and scholarships from cis women and taking over women's sports in any way. One of the trans athletes involved in this particular example that they have so graciously given has a personal best time of 12.29 seconds for the 100-meter race. And according to the NCAA website, this time would not even place her in the top 25 within the women's category for the 100 meters. Just as a note, this is not me diminishing the trans women as an athlete at all. I'm just giving this as an example to show that the fear-mongering that's going on, that trans women are suddenly taking over and stealing opportunities from cis women, is not actually happening.
Women competing against similarly gifted and trained males know the outcome of the race before it even starts. In 1 year, 275 high school boys ran faster times than the lifetime best of world champion sprinter Allison Felix.
But trans women aren't boys though, they're not men. You can't just say, oh, this number of cisgender men perform better than the championship cisgender woman, and use that as a reason to exclude trans women from women's sports. There are rules in place for eligibility to compete in competitive sports, and these rules can exclude both trans and cis people. So we can't just compare cis men and trans women and say, oh look, cis men are better, therefore trans women will be too. No, and it's clearly not even happening, is it?
That's hardly equality. Rather, it's discrimination against women and girls.
Oh, I can't.
But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The Equality Act also poses a major threat to the very existence of religious organizations like schools, charities, and even churches.
Okay, we're moving on from sports now.
For many Americans, their faith inspires them to act for the good of their neighbors and for the flourishing of society. Their faith also requires them to abide by its teachings regarding marriage, sex, and what it means to be male and female.
What's always confused me is this means that we base our current knowledge and how and who we accept based on something written thousands of years ago that's also been translated many times. I respect people's religious beliefs and people who are religious, but what I don't respect is religion being used as an excuse to be transphobic or homophobic or a bigot in any kind of way. Acting for the good of your neighbours should be for all of your neighbours.
But the Equality Act directly threatens the ability of religious organizations to serve others according to the beliefs that inspire them. The act would force faith-based adoption providers, for example, to violate their core beliefs by placing children in homes without a mother and a father.
Some really lovely imagery there, implying that the only type of family is a man and a woman, and that kids with gay parents are familyless? Is that what it is? Wow. Basically, what the Equality Act is saying is you can't discriminate against people based on them being LGBT+ anymore. You can't discriminate against trans people, you can't discriminate against gay people. Transphobes and homophobes don't like that, they get mad about it, and that's what this video is, just an anger response to having to be a respectful human. Families are families, and across many studies it has been found that the children of gay parents and the children of cisgender heterosexual parents have the same well-being, general outcomes and school advancement as each other. Plus, it's also been found that children with gay parents can actually be more emotionally stable than children with cisgender heterosexual parents. And a child's well-being is linked to family functionality, not the sexual orientation of the parents.
Worse, the act could forbid nearly every religious school, charity, and church from hiring staff and leaders that share their religious views, if those views diverge from the new government orthodoxy. Under the Equality Act regime, the federal government may have more say over the next pastor of your church than your congregation, denomination, or diocese. And that means a total abandonment of the God-given freedoms of speech, religious exercise, and of assembly that America's founders set out to protect in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
I wondered when freedom of speech was going to come up. Firstly, there is a big difference between freedom of speech and then discrimination and hate speech. If something is deemed discriminatory, you can still say it. You still have the freedom to say it. But freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequence for what you have said. When we are interacting with others in society and living our lives, freedom of speech is important, yes, but so is respecting other people and not discriminating against them. What counts as discrimination and hate speech have evolved over time with our growing knowledge, and LGBT+ people are now protected. It's almost funny, and it would be funny if it wasn't so sad, but they are complaining about their freedoms being taken away, which they're not, during a video where their entire aim is to restrict the equality and freedom of minority groups in society. Trans people living their lives. Gay couples adopting does not affect you in any way whatsoever, apart from in the made-up scenarios that transphobes and homophobes create in order to try and justify their own bigotry.
The act's devastating effects also extend to the marketplace. Just ask creative professionals like Jack Phillips or Baronel Stutzman. Both serve everyone, but cannot express all messages or participate in every event through their art. And when they politely decline to create art celebrating same-sex wedding ceremonies, their home states of Colorado and Washington hounded them with years of litigation under laws similar to the Equality Act.
So they can do whatever they want. They're running a business. They don't want to make a certain cake, they don't have to. They don't want to deliver a certain bunch of flowers, they don't have to. But there might be consequences for their refusal. If they are free to refuse, then a gay couple are free to have their wedding cake or have their wedding flowers. And they are also free to call out discrimination if they are refused service.
The Equality Act could multiply situations like these, imposing a nationwide version of the freedom-crushing state laws that harm people like Jack and Baronel. The freedom to live peaceably according to our beliefs is a bedrock of free society, resting on our human dignity and codified by the First Amendment.
What they think is a free society is a society where they are free to discriminate against LGBT plus people and face no repercussions for this. That's not a free society. That's letting the bigots win. The hypocrisy is so strong here. Oh my god.
The Equality Act imposes a belief system about marriage and human sexuality on everyone, and treats reasonable people who disagree with the government's views, based on decent and honorable grounds, as hostile and unfit to participate in the marketplace.
Ooh. It doesn't impose a belief. You can believe what you want, but you cannot discriminate against people based on this belief. Just treat people equally and with respect, and you'll be fine.
Our nation can and must do better.
And that's it. Our nation can and must do better. The rest of the ad is all just like, go here to help Alliance Defending Freedom. And I was like, no. Many nations can and must do better to protect LGBT plus people further, because ads like this are still happening. Homophobia and transphobia are still very prevalent in very many places, and it's harmful and it's hurtful, and it's being done from a place of ignorance and fear or just general dislike. I don't know of people that are different to yourself. I'm not sure what it is, but LGBT plus people living their lives does not affect anybody else. But the people who don't like LGBT plus living their lives are really affecting LGBT plus people. I think a huge problem with this video, and it's a huge problem with many videos like this and like transphobic ad campaigns and homophobic ad campaigns, is that they give you snippets of the truth mixed in with very manipulative language in order to induce fear in people and dehumanize the group that they're talking about. Throughout the entire video, they never described trans women as women or as trans women. It was always in some way as a biological male or a man who thinks he's a woman. Just really wrong ways and incorrect ways to describe trans women. I felt like this was a really important video to unpack. I hope you think I did a good job. So many of you sent it to me, and it truly is one of the worst anti-trans ads I've ever seen. It's full of quarter truths. It doesn't even deserve to say it's got half truths. It's got misleading statements and highly bigoted views that fundamentally come across as incredibly selfish and just a refusal to simply treat others with respect and not discriminate against them. It's literally like, hey, please stop discriminating against LGBT plus people. No. And on top of that, we're going to make up a bunch of scenarios and dehumanize trans people, particularly trans women, to make other people scared of you. It's exhausting, but the positive thing to come out with videos like this, and yes, there is a positive, is they're only being made because trans people and LGBT plus people in general are getting more rights, are getting more protection, are getting more recognition. And the bigots feel the need to shout louder. But it's okay. I know it's hurtful, but it means we're making progress. So yeah, that's everything for today's video. Please leave your comments down below. What did you think of this? Think about giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing if you want to, but no pressure if you don't. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Much love. Bye.